turn right there.
I know how to go to church.
Mommy, look at my arm, it's pretty.
What on earth did you...
Stella, why are you kicking my seat?
Mommy,
Oh, my lipstick! Can you drive more carefully, please?
Why is she in my car in the first place? Stella, stop kicking my seat.
Mommy,
I don't know why you won't just listen to me.
Why?
That's it. I've had enough of it. Hey, how you feeling today?
That's the question. How you feeling today? You walk in here, there's a certain pressure to say, great. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life, how stressful it is at work, or how much conflict you experienced on the way here, or what kind of threats were made in the car. It doesn't matter how much trouble your marriage might be in or how overwhelmed you might feel as a parent when you come in and someone says, how you doing, how you feeling? The response, spiritual response at least, seems like it should be, okay, fine, good. If you're really spiritual, then blessed, so blessed. We get in competitions about how blessed we are. I hear this out in the atrium. I've heard things like, how are you doing? I'm blessed, I'm so blessed. If I was any more blessed, there'd be two of me. I've heard that one. If I was any more blessed, I'd have to sit on my hands to keep from clapping. Guy said that to me. Well, that's pretty blessed. So we feel like the most spiritual answers are not honesty, not vulnerability, but okay, fine, good, great, so great. How are you? So great. And we kind of go back and forth with this. So in this series, in these next number of weeks, we're going to talk about dealing with our feelings and our emotions in a way that is honest, in a way that honors God, in a way that leads us towards His purpose for our lives. I know for some of you, this idea of a series where we're going to talk about our emotions for 6 weeks, like you don't know how you feel, but you know how you feel about talking about your feelings for 6 weeks, like that sounds miserable. I get it. I know some of you men, this is where you're at. You don't want to do this, but I would just tell you, those of you who don't want to do it are some of the people who really need to do it. Like your anger, you don't know where your anger comes from, but there is a connection between your anger and your refusal to talk about your feelings. You don't know where your apathy comes from. Like you don't know where your indifference comes from. That comes from some emotions and some feelings that haven't been surrendered over and redeemed by Jesus. And so we're going to talk about our emotions and feelings, but it's a little bit tough in church because we have this idea that feelings and faith don't always go together. That feelings don't fit into the faith equation. Maybe you grew up in a home or in a church where when it came to your feelings, you were taught one of two things. They're right feelings or they're wrong feelings. There's the way you should feel, there's the way you shouldn't feel. So when you felt this way, you were taught, don't do that. Don't feel that way, feel this way. Like that's how you were discipled. That's how you were taught to think as a Christian. Don't feel that way, just feel this way. Don't feel sad, feel happy. I feel anxious. Well, don't do that. Don't be anxious. Be at peace. Like that was the spiritual solution. If this is how you're feeling, don't feel that way anymore. Well, what if I don't feel like not feeling that way? How do I fix that? And so here's what happens. We start pretending. We start pretending we feel some way that we don't actually feel. And we'll say to people around us, when they ask how we're doing, we'll say, okay, fine, good, but we're not okay, fine, or good. We just know that that's the right answer. We just know if we tell them how we're feeling, they're just gonna tell us to stop feeling that way, and that doesn't help, so I'll just say what's expected of me. And so it's difficult, I think, for some of us to talk about our emotions. I've discovered for me, like emojis have unlocked emotions for me that I never knew I had. Like I'll see an emoji and I'm like, that's how I feel about this. I'll send the emoji. And so to use emoji language, like we know we wanna feel this way, happy, but sometimes we feel this way, sad. Like we know we wanna feel this way, kind of just cool, calm, confident, but sometimes we feel pretty anxious and uncertain and overwhelmed. Like we wanna feel cheerful, but sometimes we feel like this. And sometimes we feel like this, and sometimes we feel like this, like that. That's more real. And then sometimes we just find ourselves numb. Like the feelings are just not there at all. And that's how we've dealt with our emotions, is just kind of by shutting down. And so we don't necessarily feel happiness or sadness. We don't necessarily feel grief, but we don't necessarily feel joy. And in our relationships, we don't necessarily feel love and connection, but we don't feel bitterness and anger either. We're just numb. And so in this series, we want to talk about what it looks like to have emotional health, because if we're going to be spiritually mature, we need to be emotionally healthy. And we're going to study the Psalms to help us with this. So David is a great example of this man's man who was a giant killer. He was a mighty warrior. He's a powerful king, a man after God's own heart. But he was an emotional dude. Like, he had no trouble expressing his emotions and his feelings to God and to some of the people around him. And so we're going to use the Psalms to help us deal with how we feel, to help us manage our emotions. But this week, as we start off this series, I want us to take some time just to look at Jesus and how he handled his emotions and his feelings with his life here on earth. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to Matthew 26. Matthew 26, we're going to see Jesus in this very emotional time in his life. I know that for some of you, the idea of Jesus being emotional, that it doesn't feel quite right because, again, you don't think of emotions as being very spiritual. You don't think of feelings as being a part of faith. But if you read through the Gospels, one study showed that Jesus experienced 39 emotions in his life. And some of you didn't even know there were 39 emotions. I had 3 teenage daughters living at home for a while, so I know that. There's at least 39 emotions. But Jesus, if you read through the Gospels, 39 some emotions, there are all kinds of examples of this, right? So when he meets a centurion who just demonstrates great faith, Jesus is delighted. But Jesus is sad on the Mount of Olives when he looks over the city of Jerusalem and he thinks about people who have rejected him. And Jesus is angry when he thinks about the religious leaders who care more about religious tradition than about life transformation. And Jesus is full of joy when 72 disciples come back and they're telling stories of the powerful ways God has worked in them and through them. And Jesus weeps and he grieves when his friend Lazarus dies, and Jesus feels shame. You might not think that since he was perfect, but 1 Peter 2 says Jesus felt shame. It wasn't his shame, it was yours, it was mine, but he felt shame. And so you read through the Gospels and you just find that Jesus had a lot of different feelings. And so he, at times, was discouraged, but he also knew delight. And he knew loneliness, but he knew love and longing. And Jesus knew pain and he knew pleasure. And the point is this, that with his life here on earth, Jesus shows us that emotions and feelings are not associated with being weak. They're associated with being human. And this is who we've been made to be. The question is not, are emotions or feelings right or wrong? The question is, what do we do with them? How do we manage them? How do we deal with how we feel? So in the series, we're going to be talking about that. I think it helps to understand where the word emotion comes from. It comes from the Latin word, the emovere, which just means to move, to move. That God gives us emotions to move us. Now the question becomes, where are they taking us? Like if your emotions are a vehicle, you get in a vehicle of anxiety, where's your anxiety taking you? That's really the question. You get in the vehicle of guilt, where's your guilt taking you? Where's your loneliness taking you? Where's your anger taking you? That there are these emotions that aren't wrong initially in and of themselves. The question is, what direction are you gonna go? So think of it like this. Think of a road sign. You go left, you go right. You're gonna go one direction or another, and every time you experience an emotion or a feeling, you're getting in a vehicle and you're gonna go this way or you're gonna go that way. So you're gonna experience some shame, and when those feelings of shame come and you find yourself in that vehicle, it's either gonna take you to a place of isolation or it's gonna take you to a place of forgiveness and freedom. If you feel loneliness, where's that vehicle gonna take you? It's gonna take you maybe to a place of depression and despair, or it's gonna take you to a place of connection and dependence on God. Here's the point. There are all kinds of emotions that we might feel. Those emotions are an opportunity for us to move closer to God. The question is, what do you do with them? For many of us, when we felt these negative emotions, the big idea we've heard is, don't do that. Don't feel that way. But biblically, what we find is that those emotions are an opportunity for God to take us to a deeper place, to a more mature place. The question is, what direction are we gonna go with them? So, in Matthew 26, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. And just all kinds of emotions here. It's already been an emotional evening for him. He was in the upper room for the Last Supper. Judas has already left to betray him. Jesus knows what's gonna happen to him. He's gonna be arrested, he's gonna be beaten, he's gonna be crucified. He knows all of this. And so when we pick up in Matthew 26, it's just, he's overwhelmed with emotion. Starting in verse 36, it says, then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. And he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, it's James and John. They took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and he prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Luke, who was a medical doctor, as he tells us about this moment, he points out that Jesus experienced some physical symptoms of just feeling so emotionally overwhelmed. Luke says in chapter 22, verse 44, and being in anguish, Jesus prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. And this is a relatively rare medical condition known as hematidrosis, where tiny capillaries in the sweat glands break because of overwhelming emotions or anxiety, and it creates this bloody sweat combination, oftentimes followed by your body going into shock. The point is that Jesus was emotionally overwhelmed in this moment. He says, my soul is overwhelmed to the point of death. And I think there are some Christians who would try to counsel Jesus out of that. Jesus says, my soul is overwhelmed to the point of death. Don't feel that way. Feel this way. My soul is overwhelmed to the point of death. Smile. God loves you, Jesus. Did you know that? Haven't you read Romans 8:28? In all things God works together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Jesus, if you love him, if you're called according to his purpose, don't feel that way, feel this way. You gonna tell him that? Jesus, you just need to have more faith. I'm not saying that. And yet, I think for many of us, we think that's the message. It's wrong to feel certain ways. You just need to not feel that way. You need to feel this way. And I hope for some of you, as you read about this emotional time in the life of Jesus, that it frees you from this pressure Christianity has put on you to always be happy. And if you came here and you are overwhelmed to the point of death, Jesus does not say to you, don't feel that way. Jesus says to you, I know how that feels. I know how that feels. And understanding that, getting that theology right completely changes how we process our emotions and our feelings. And so Jesus kind of models this. I want to talk to kind of two groups of people here. It's a little bit challenging to talk about emotions to this church because what I love about this church, maybe my favorite thing, one of my favorite things, is that this church is, incredibly multi-generational. Love that about this place. So right now, I'm speaking to at least 4 or 5 generations, and how you process emotion and feeling generationally is very different. Like those of you who are part of the silent generation, those of you who are part of the boomer generation, for many of you, what you were taught was emotional avoidance. That this is the way you deal with your emotions, is by avoiding them. And so certain emotions weren't allowed, and certain emotions should be avoided. And there's others of you who are a part of the next generation who were raised by the boomers, and we swung kind of the other way, many of us, kind of Gen Xers, millennials, and it's not how we thought of things. We weren't raised the same way. We were raised on Biggie and Nirvana, right? Like you feel your feelings. You just put it all out there. It's different. If it's emotional avoidance, like if that's your approach, then it catches up to you. You stuff it down, but then it surfaces in anger or it surfaces in apathy. And so you have to stop and you ask yourself, why do I deal with what I deal with? Like, why do I drink when I drink? Why do I compulsively look at porn? Well, why do I go on a shopping spree online and feel better? Why do I find myself with a spoon eating chocolate chip cookie dough directly out of the carton? Where's that coming from? Why do I go from relationship to relationship but can't seem to make a commitment? Why do I yell and scream, promise myself I won't, and then yell and scream some more? Emotional avoidance, oftentimes. Just stuff it down. But the Bible talks about that what's in the heart comes out. It comes out eventually. The millennials, the Gen Xers, it tends to be kind of the other extreme. It tends to be more emotional indulgence. We just feel our feelings. That's our approach. That's how many of us were discipled culturally. Just feel your feelings. Whatever you feel, that's what's right. You just find your identity in your desires, that you let yourself be dominated by your feelings. And so your feelings are your GPS. Like you wake up and however you feel, that's gonna determine your day and how you treat people, and you just feel your feelings. And if there are people around you, I'm sorry, that's just how I feel. What am I supposed to do? That's just how I feel about the situation. And your feelings have become like a thermostat in your home or in your workplace or in your school. It determines the temperature for the people around you. Dr. Daniel Coleman talks about just the power of this dynamic. He says, emotions are more contagious than the flu. He says, this dynamic is so powerful that in one study, 3 volunteers sat silently in a circle for 2 minutes, and at the end of the time, the most emotionally expressive person transmitted his or her mood to the other 2 without saying a word. In every such session, the mood the most expressive person had going in was also the mood the other 2 felt coming out, whether happy, bored, anxious, or angry. And some of you are sharing life with somebody like this. Just emotionally indulgent, just feeling their feelings. And yet, as we study Scripture, what we're gonna see is that our emotions are a gauge. Our emotions are a gauge. That they are meant to get our attention, and they're meant to move us in a direction that makes us more like Jesus. We're able to accomplish God's purpose for our life. We're able to become more spiritually mature as we become more emotionally healthy. But you gotta pay attention to the gauge. When I was an intern here, like 20 some years ago, 1998, my wife and I were here. We drove a Plymouth Breeze. And the only thing that car was good for is sermon illustrations. Like that's it. Like I was always causing me trouble, always having problems with that thing. And at one point while we were interns here, the check engine light came on the car, and I knew I needed to do something about it, but I didn't know what to do. Like, it's flashing at me, need to do something. I mean, I can look under the hood, but I don't know what I'm looking at. I could take it to a mechanic, but it doesn't really matter what the mechanic would say. I don't have the money to do it. I don't have the money to fix it. So my strategy was, let's keep driving, see what happens. And people would sit in the car with me and they would notice it. They'd be like, your check engine light's on. Yeah, it's actually flashing at me. I know. Are you gonna do anything about it? No. Nope, I'm not. I don't really know what to do, so I'm just gonna keep driving. At one point, got tired of people telling me about it, and so I just took a piece of black electric tape and I just covered the check engine light. Problem solved, really. Like, I just stopped noticing it, looking at it. Months go by. Totally forgot that underneath that black tape, that flash engine, the check engine light was flashing. And then one day I'm pulling out of the grocery store, my car is in drive, and I put it into drive, and the engine revs up, but it doesn't go. Apparently it was a transmission. Major issue, major problem. The manufacturer of the car had designed the car in such a way that when the check engine light comes on, it's meant to get my attention, to let me know you need to look under the hood. There's something that needs your attention. Now you can let it go. You can keep driving. That might work for a while, but eventually there's gonna be a much higher price to pay down the road. And so for many of us, this is what our emotions are trying to do, to get our attention. And we tried for a while to just look away. We try to avoid it, cover it up. Other people might point it out to us. Hey, you ought to look under the hood. But we just keep driving, and then eventually the whole thing blows up in our face. And so the question is, how do we deal with our feelings? How do we deal with our emotions? And in Matthew 26, Jesus models this for us. He gives us an example of what it looks like to release our feelings to God so that those feelings can be redeemed, so that he can do for our feelings what he wants to do for all of us, to make them new. And so first thing you see Jesus do is he tells his friends how he's feeling, and he asks his friends to stay with him. Verse 38, then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.